Well, welcome to my office. As a teaching professional, playing professional, trick shot artist, I just love being out here on the golf course. I started playing when I was maybe 6, 7 years old, just kind of whacking balls around with plastic clubs. My wee granny from Scotland gave me some plastic clubs, and I would whack the ball around the backyard, and my dad said, it looks like he's kind of got a knack for the swing. So he picked me up some junior golf clubs. He picked himself up some clubs, and then picked up the Jack Nicklaus Golf My Way series. And pretty much anything that he could learn for himself to play better, he would teach me. We spent hours and hours out at the Aussie Rules football field in Darwin in the Northern Territory, and he would drop me off at the footy field in before school, and I would practice until it was time to go to school. I would shag all my golf balls and drop the clubs and the golf balls back off at the house, and then he would take me to school, and then after school it would be more of the same. And on vacation time and break time from school, I would go to the Darwin Golf Club with a bunch of my little friends, and we would hang out in the junior room, and we would play pool, and we would throw the cricket ball around, and we would have little games of cricket inside. It was pretty hot in Darwin, and then we would go play golf, and we would have putting games all around the practice green and chipping competitions, and then we'd go play, and we would just spend the entire time out there. So what I wanted to do is just kind of fast track from when I was a little taka and a little kid growing up in Australia, and why I decided to just pursue the game of golf and pursue teaching it and playing at a high level. For me to really grasp a hold of the game, it took me playing several other sports. I played Aussie Rules football and cricket and tennis and table tennis and swimming, and I ran track. Did anything and everything I could with sports. Didn't like to spend too much time in the classroom. My math and English skills were not very good. But what happened was golf kind of transformed all of that for me. It put it in perspective. Anytime I wanted to learn something in my math class, then I would be pertaining to golf. Anytime I wanted to, write a story, it was about golf. Later on in college, when I was taking kinesiology and anatomy classes for my degree, which is in recreation therapy, it's kind of a sports science blend of physical education and therapy. It was always about golf. It was learning the golf swing. It was learning how the body's supposed to move. And golf was something that I always captured as my tool for learning life and learning all my studies in school. So I played all the other sports, and I felt like, okay, well, golf for me is the most challenging. I could throw a ball with the best of them and kick it with the best of them, and I was a fast runner and could do all that stuff. But there was something about golf that seemed to me like it was just infinitely refinable. It was a sport that as you got older, you could actually just get better at. And I learned a lot from the Jack Nicklaus My Way books that my dad taught me. I had some great instruction. Alex Kippen was my first instructor. Then went to Adelaide, where Brian Crafter was another teaching pro that helped me. Very famous Australian golf professional. And my dad said, well, you know what, you've got such a skill at this, we're going to find a school that specializes in golf. So I went to the Coralban International School. And at the Coralban International School, my coach there was Peter Claughton, and he really helped me to focus in on golf. When I went there, I was a 15 handicap, and when I graduated high school a few years later, I was a +2. And we got some great exposure there. I got to work with Steve Bann, Ross Herbert. These guys came out of the Australian Institute of Sport. These are the coaches, Ian Triggs, Great instructors in Australia that really helped me become a better player. One of the interesting things that happened was they had their different philosophies. At the time, Greg Norman was the #1 player in the world. It was a great time for Australian golf. Nick Faldo was going head to head with him, and there was kind of a, I don't know, it was kind of a blend. You had this athletic, raw, strong Greg Norman just smashing the ball, and then you had the more methodical, rotary swinging Nick Faldo, who was working with David Ledbetter and was constantly working on his game, trying to get better. And it seemed like Greg was just a little bit more natural. I had some lessons from Charlie Earp, who was Greg's coach in Australia at Royal Queensland. And so I got some great exposure. One of the best bunker lessons I ever had was from Norman von Nida out at Corralbin. Randall Vines was the head pro out there, and he played on the tour, and the exposure I got and the amount of great coaching I got was just fantastic. For me, I had to sort through a lot of stuff. I mean, you're going through your teenage years, you're trying to figure out what's up and down in life, let alone your golf game. And what I found was I could pretty much do anything. You know, I would take the Ledbetter type approach, and I would swing more connected and more around. I would take the Greg Norman type approach and swing my arms and my body simultaneously together in one big rhythmical motion, and generate a lot of hip rotation and leg power and drive through the ball. I had great hand-eye coordination, so I was able to pretty much do anything I wanted. As I made it to the U.S. and began playing at a high level and playing college golf, it was great. I mean, when I first came to college, I went to my first college tournament, shot 75 in round 1, which was only one shot off the lead, and then shot 64 in my second round, and ended up winning my first ever college golf tournament that I ever played in. That semester, I also had a 4.0. At the end of that semester, the fall semester of '93, I actually had a 4.0 GPA, and I had the #1 stroke average in all of Division I men's golf. It was great. I mean, I thought the world was my oyster, and golf was taking off, and it was just a natural progression for me to get my tour card and all that. So around about the same time, that's when Tiger Woods started coming on the scene. And well, he had been on the scene with his junior golf, but as he was getting into college, it was becoming more evident that yes, he was going to continue on winning everything in college and amateur golf, and then going on and turning pro. And for me, I felt like, okay, well, I'm going to use my training, I'm going to use my degree in therapy and understanding anatomy and physiology, and I'm going to become the best swinger of the club that I could. I had some pretty good examples of people that I got to see from Australia, like Steve Elkington, was renowned for having the greatest swing, the most visually pleasing swing, purest swing. I played against his brother Rob Elkington in New South Wales Golf Club in a Australian Open qualifier. So in college, one really unique experience happened for me is when I got to caddy for Mac O'Grady. And I went to Annandale Country Club, and I felt like, I just want to get close to these guys. I feel like if I can get close to a tour player, I'll maybe learn something a little bit more. So I found the caddy master, and I said, I want a caddy. And so the caddy master, just like he would for any college kid probably, just kind of put my name on the list. And then the very next day, actually I think it was that night, I got a phone call, and he said, hey, you won't believe this, we've got this tour veteran, and his name's Mac O'Grady. And Mac O'Grady wants a college player. He wants somebody who he can kind of help. He wants to extend his knowledge to a young college player, and he wants him to caddy for him. So I said, wow, that's that's awesome. You know, I knew Mac O'Grady had contended well in Masters, and he'd won on tour, and I didn't really understand his full story. I didn't really understand that he was a pure ball striker and a guru of the swing, and could swing the club just as well left-handed as he could right-handed, but I would find that out very quickly. So the first year that I caddied for Mac, it was like 5 days of just on-course instruction. Every shot, okay, when you're in this position, you need to do this. When you're doing this, when you've got the shot out of the rough, you need to do this. So after day one, my head was just full of information that Mac had given me. And so I went down to the local store, and I picked up a little notebook, and I just wrote all the notes, wrote them in there as much as I could, and then I kept it in my pocket. And then each practice round and each round, whenever I got a chance, I would just jot down more and more notes of what Mac was telling me. It was fantastic. The Annandale Golf Club and Whisper Lakes Golf Club driving range kind of backed up to each other. So Mac would drive me home. I was staying at my coach, Eddie Payton's house at Whisper Lakes. And he would drive me out of the property and around, and we would drive right past the Whisper Lakes driving range. So we would pop out of the car, and Mac would just open the trunk, and he'd pull out his Hogan medallion blades with leather-wrapped grips, and he would just have me hit balls on the range. We did it several times that week. And he worked with me on my swing. He actually was more interested, I think, in seeing me make the fast improvements that I was making just in the few hours that we spent on the range than he was, I think, playing in the tournament. He was so generous with his time, and we had a blast. And I remember after that tournament week was done, I called one of my teammates who's playing on tour, fantastic golfer, and I said, Tim, you know, I'm gunning for you this year. I got these amazing lessons from Mac O'Grady, and I'm changing my swing. I've changed it to be more of a rotational type swing, and I'm not doing my normal kind of into out, high release, high draw, power draw type swing. I'm changing it. I can now play a fade on command, and I've got all these great shots I can play. So another year rolled around, and I had the pleasure again of caddying for Mac again. I wasn't planning on caddying at the Deposit Guarantee tournament, and he contacted the caddy master, and he said, hey, where's that college kid that caddied for me last year? I want to have him out here again. And so it was a blast. I got to caddy for Mac again. We learned what was interesting about that tournament was he showed up with a full bag of right-handed clubs and a half bag of left-handed clubs. And here I am, only 5'7" at the time, probably only 145, 150 pounds, and I'm carrying a staff bag with a set and a half worth of clubs and balls, and he probably had bricks and all kinds of stuff in there. But again, it was fantastic. I mean, I got to see him go through the process of actually trying to figure out, is he going to play right-handed or left-handed in a tour event? Ultimately, he came down to the point where he was going to play right-handed and hit some lob wedge and sand wedge shots left-handed and putt left-handed. That's what was the progression through practice rounds, and by the time the tournament round came, I think the only thing that was left was he was actually going to putt left-handed. Everything else was going to be right-handed. So anyway, learning as much as I did about how the body operates and the physics that were involved, Mac helped me to learn about centrifugal force, and he taught me about centripetal force, a new force. So that was in 1997, and I felt like, again, here I am getting ready to graduate. I'm going to take the world by storm and get straight out on tour. So I practiced. I hit thousands of balls. I practiced like crazy, and I ended up sustaining an injury to my wrist. I kind of struggled through some mini tour events that summer, and I would pay my $300 entry fee, and I would win $300 by just making the cut, and it was just breaking even. So it didn't really work. My wife, Laura, she said, you know, this isn't going to work, and you need to get a real job if you're going to help pay bills around here. So I said, all right, well, I'll use my degree. I'll go ahead and get a degree. I get a job as an activity director for an adult daycare facility. So it was great. I was passionate about the job. I got to work with adults with disabilities. They maybe had a head trauma, or they were, as an adult, 18 and over, now needing care throughout the day. So that's why it was called an adult daycare, because they needed care for whatever reason. And I was there to help provide recreational activities and therapeutic activities. And in the meantime, this was in Yuma, Arizona, in the meantime, I would go and practice on my game, and I would play the local skins games, etc. And I just couldn't get away from the fact that I was going to be a golf professional. And at the time, there really weren't any golf jobs around. I felt like I needed to just get in there. I needed to start. I could start in a player service. I could do whatever it took. So I said, I'm going to start the PGA program. So I went down to Rio Rico, south of Tucson, and passed my PAT. After I passed my PAT, I started working in the golf business down in Somerton, Arizona, at a little executive course called Dove Valley. Chuck Dodd was the owner and head pro director of golf, and he gave me a start, and I earned $6.25 an hour just ringing up the retired folks coming out there to play 9 or 18 holes. I learned very quickly, though, that if I could get paid $30 an hour on the driving range versus $6.25 in the shop, that I wanted to spend all my time out on the driving range giving lessons. I was able to give a ton of lessons in the area. Many of the members from the Yuma Country Club would drive out to Somerton and take lessons from me. Until one summer when the head pro there, Dennis LaDawn, called me up and said, "Hey, would you like to come and help do a junior clinic at the Yuma Country Club?" And after he saw me interacting with the kids and saw my teaching abilities, he offered me a job as an assistant. So in that period of time, as I progressed and I went through all my PGA levels and got my Class A, I started my academy in Yuma. Then I was a head pro there. Then I transitioned from there to Kokopelli, where I was the director of instruction for the Nike Learning Center. Then I went from the director of instruction position at Kokopelli in Gilbert to a faculty position with the Golf Academy of America. So I was in charge of some teaching classes, golf business management classes. I did that for a couple of years, and then I got back into teaching full-time and taught for resort golf schools out at Gold Canyon. It was in that period of time where I started to hone my skills as a trick shot artist. I figured out I could do a bunch of different tricks, and I built myself some long drivers, different headed clubs, and was getting ready to just kind of start having fun doing trick shots. And it was in that period of time where I was teaching a lot and doing a lot of club fitting that I felt like, the whole club, the piece of the equipment is so important in the equation. Oftentimes as a teacher, what would happen is I would give a golf lesson, and the 3 days after the lesson, the student would be just trying to retain what it was that they'd learned. But then a few days later, they would kind of forget. And it got to the point where the student felt like the only way they were hitting the ball well was when they were actually standing in front of me for a golf lesson. And I couldn't figure it out, because during the lesson we would get it and everybody would be flushing it, and then the next day it would be great, and maybe a couple days after it would start to deteriorate. Then I started to realize with the club fitting that I was doing through resort golf schools, and as I was developing my philosophy on the swing, the club was a huge piece. So I said, you know what, I need to find a place where I can learn more about the clubs. So I got a job at Stix in Scottsdale. At the time, Mark Timms was owning it. He owns Cool Clubs now, and it was kind of the first boutique club fitting establishment. It was very high end, and they were focusing on making sure that the clubs were fit for the player. So I worked there for about a year, and as I saw people come in the door, I said, one of the philosophies at the facility was, you fit the person that walks in the door. Don't try to change their swing. Just help them to play better, tweaking their equipment. And one student came in one day, he hadn't been playing golf very long, and he was swinging at at the ball relatively poorly, and I felt really bad that I was about to fit him with some clubs that were only going to get him this much better. So I couldn't help it. I kind of broke policy, and I said, you know what? Can I show you something? I think you need to do this with your swing. And I showed him a couple of things, and his club head speed actually increased 18 miles an hour faster. Well, that's a whole nother person. You can't fit somebody who's at one point and then a new person 18 miles an hour faster. So I said, here's what we'll do. I won't charge you for the fitting. I want you to go off. I want you to work on this stuff with your existing clubs. Then I want you to come back and we'll do the whole fitting again, because in a couple of weeks you'll be a different person. So he did that. He came back. He was a different person. He was crushing the ball. And we were able to then fit him appropriately to those clubs. So at that point I started to realize that it's not really one, it's not the instruction, and it's not really just the clubs. It has to be a blend of both. So that's really where my pursuit of trying to figure out how the body and the club and playing of the game all interacted. So I said, okay, I'm going to start with the body. I'm going to break it down. I'm going to go back, pull out my kinesiology papers. I'm going to analyze how the body moves and see if I can figure out how to move that efficiently and smoothly and simply, understanding whether or not I'm causing damage to the body, damage to any part of my elbow or knee or back. Now I'm going to figure out what's the simplest way for me to move, using some of the stuff that Mac had taught me and understanding how to move, dealing with my spine. I personally had encountered some lower back issues and tightness, so I said, all right, I need to smooth out that rotation. So I left Hot Stix and I got a job as an assistant pro at Superstition Mountain. And the reason why I chose Superstition Mountain was because Mike Malasco was teaching there. And I had heard that Mike really understood the body. He really understood how the body operated. And I was playing in a section event with, at the time, it was a director of golf. His name was Jason Walter. And I was playing in a section event with Jason, and we had a great game. I think I happened to beat him by maybe 1 or 2 strokes. Jason is a good player. And I had my resume in my golf bag, and I gave it to him, and I said, hey, look, I'll take whatever job you've got. And he called me back a couple of days later, and he said, you've been a head pro, a director of instruction, you've worked at Hot Stix, you've been a faculty member at the Golf Academy. Why do you want to work at Superstition Mountain? And I said, well, I just want to get back into the green grass side of the business. I want to work at a nice property in proximity to my house. It was the nicest facility that I could possibly work at. And I wanted to work with Mike. And he said, well, the only job we have is a player service job. So you're going to start in August in the middle of the summer. Not going to pay you very much. You'll get some tips. And that's how you can start. So I started there in August. And didn't really get to see Mike a whole lot. I was working outside. In October, some shuffling happened and I worked my way into the shop. After I got myself in the shop, I started doing a lot more private lessons. About 6 years later, I was giving most of the members at the club lessons. I had seen handicaps drop. I had been refining my philosophy. I had been learning from Mike. I had been taking what I felt he was teaching and then applying it to what I could understand. And then I was adding in the equipment piece. That was very, very important to me. I felt that if a student was truly going to improve, a lot of the way they moved had to be based around the club. If the club was too short for them, they were going to compensate or manipulate. If the angle was off or the club was too long, they were again going to have to compensate or manipulate. So I wanted to make the simplest rotary motion I could, the most efficient motion I could with the golf swing, and then make sure that the club attached to the body properly with the hands and the length, so that as you made, or as my students made that rotary move, they would then strike the ball purely. And I started doing it myself, and I started having all my students do it, and I was seeing just fabulous results. And as I was doing it, I was getting better. I was getting to the point where I was done working on the golf swing. I had spent all my life trying to strike the ball better. Now it was time, now that I feel like I had figured it out, Now I was just going to work on the short game and the putting. I was renowned for being a poor putter. I was one of the best ball strikers to not be on tour because I was a poor putter. At least that was the label I was starting to get. So I was working on my swing, I got it dialed, I got my equipment set where they needed to be, I got my lie angles and lengths and grip and everything. Now it was time to focus on my putting. So I started focusing on my putting, and I learned as much as I could from watching some DVDs from Ben Crenshaw and Dave Stockton, and I watched a little bit about what Dave Pelz was talking about. I talked and had a nice meeting with Todd Sones, who invented the Couture kind of putting fitting system. I got as much information as I could, and again, trying to figure out how the body should operate. At the time, I was still stuck on a little bit of a rotary motion for putting, so it didn't really work until I started to get more upright and allow my arms to swing, more of a Stockton and Crenshaw kind of fluid motion. But anyway, here I am today. I'm sitting at Desert Forest out in the short game area, just chatting with you a little bit. The last 4 years have been amazing for me. I played on the Web.com tour, and the only way I got there at the age of 37, it was because I felt like I was moving so efficiently and so repetitively, and my skills and my style of play and my technique was so refinable that I was only ever just going to get better and better, which I really felt like I did. The only thing that waylaid my progress was I broke this hook of hemate bone in my hand. I actually did it doing a driver fitting session. Believe it or not, I figured out how to change my swing in such a way that I was hitting my drives over 330 yards, and with the right combination of driver and body move. Problem was, my hand and wrists were not strong enough to hold on, and I think that's what happened. I had weakness in my forearms and learned this new move, which was creating so much more force, and it ended up impacting my hand. So now I get to teach, and I get to take the progression. So I went from being just a hodgepodge student of the game, capturing pieces of information. Then I got some great insight, and I got to refine the movement of the body down to what the way the body's supposed to operate. After I figured out how the body was supposed to operate, then I said, okay, I need to attach the club to the spin. So I call the golf swing a golf spin. I don't refer to it as a swing. A swing is kind of when you push a kid on a swing. A spin better describes the golf move. So that's what I've coined my full swing philosophy, is the golf spin. The golf spin, the way it operates, plus the attachment to the club, then fills that gap simply between you and the ball. If you're spinning well and you're efficient and you're creating great force, centrifugal force, balanced with centripetal force, and it's simple and it's effortless, then you've got the right combination. Now your consistency of your ball striking is so much more improved. That's just one part of the game. So I found the philosophy on the swing, and that's the way I teach. I believe the philosophy is simple, and it works because it helped me to get to the tour level. I've got a lot of energy in my ability to spin to the right, spin to the left. What happens down your body and through your spine is all of your muscles in your back, down through your spine, if they're spinning to the right and spinning to the left, they're not arching. They're not bending. You're not going this way and torquing your body. You're not coming through and torquing it that way. If your 2 feet are locked on the ground, your spine tilts over, and all you do is oscillate around your spine, I call it the golf spin, right? You push a kid at the park on a swing. The swing goes side to side. A swing is side to side. A spin is round and round. If I'm going to create the best spin that I can, I'm going to tilt and I'm going to spin and I'm going to repeat it over and over again, so that all I'm doing is getting really consistent at tilting and spinning.